Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has officially dropped out of the 2024 election and endorsed Trump to become the 47th president. This is a huge blow to the Harris campaign, considering that Kennedy commanded 5 to 10 percentage points of the American electorate. And so in this video, we'll be taking a look at the 2024 electoral map as a result of RFK Jr.'s exit from the race. RFK Jr. really was a strong third-party candidate. He was polling at around 5% when he dropped out, and before that, when Biden was still in the race, there were many points in time when he was commanding 10% support. For a non-major party candidate, that is a pretty big deal, and so his endorsement is going to go pretty far in terms of helping Trump retake the presidency. We're going to start off by filling in the solid states on this map, and the list for Harris is going to shrink to an even shorter one. Solid states are ones where either candidate is going to win by 15 percentage points or more. The solid blue states for Harris, we have California, Hawaii, as well as Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and the 1st District of Maine. This gives her just 97 electoral votes. As for Trump, he's going to easily clinch Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, nearly all of Nebraska, along with Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, South Carolina, Alaska, and the 2nd District of Maine. And so with these safe states filled in, Trump takes an early lead with 126 electoral votes to the vice president's 97. Most people agree that RFK dropping out is going to help Trump more. According to Polymarket, there's a 71% chance that Trump is going to benefit the most, while there's a 34% chance that Harris is going to gain more in the polls as a result of Kennedy's exit. And so coming back to the map, we're now going to fill in the likely states for both candidates. These are states that will be decided by margins between 7 to 15 points. They're going to be more competitive than the safe states, but one candidate or the other is still going to maintain a relatively clear advantage. And so starting off with the likely blue states, we have some states that typically would be solid for Democrats, especially for Joe Biden in 2020. I mean, states like Washington, Oregon, Illinois, he won pretty easily. Even New York, that's just not going to happen for Kamala Harris, especially with RFK Jr. endorsing Trump. States like Washington and Oregon are only going to go to Harris by around 12 to 14 points. We also have Colorado. This state is probably going to be in the single-digit range in terms of the margin that separates the two candidates. Joe Biden carried Colorado by 14 points 4 years ago. It's probably going to drop to at least 9 points this time around. Illinois will also not be safe for the vice president. And on the Northeast, we have New York, New Jersey, and even Joe Biden's home state of Delaware. New Jersey and Delaware simply aren't that blue of states fundamentally, and considering the Democrats' issues with Bob Menendez and his bribery scandal in New Jersey, that's not going to help them at all. New Jersey is going to be likely blue, and in New York, Kamala Harris is on track to being the first Democrat to win the Empire State by a non-solid margin since Michael Dukakis in 1988. And this will put Harris at 191 electoral votes. As for Trump, we have quite a few likely states as well that will make a pretty big impact on his electoral count. And in terms of the impact that Kennedy will have throughout the entire map, he was basically polling at around 5 to 10 points in every single state. He was pretty consistent, not like other third-party candidates of the past. For example, Evan McMullin in 2016 really only won votes from his home state of Utah. He won 21%. Clinton, for reference, only won 27. And so that is not the type of impact that Kennedy has had on the race. He's been polling pretty consistently in every single state. And that is why Trump is going to receive a bump basically everywhere. Starting off with the two most obvious likely Trump states, we have Iowa and Ohio, two states that used to be hyper-competitive but not anymore. Over the past few years, they've taken a gigantic shift to the right after Trump flipped them in 2016, winning both by nearly 10-point margins. He won them by nearly identical margins in 2020, and he's going to win them for a third time in a row this November. Iowa and Ohio are both going to be likely red, with Trump on track to winning it by just over a double-digit margin. Before we continue, only 12% of you guys are actually subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November, and follow me on Twitter for daily political updates, link in the description below. We have two more likely states for the former president. 70 electoral votes total from Texas and Florida. The Lone Star State has been Republican in every single election since 1980, and it's not going to flip this November under any circumstances. In 2020, Democrats poured hundreds of millions of dollars into advertising in the Lone Star State. They thought they could win Texas, but they still lost by 5.6%. Polling seriously underestimated Trump here. Trump was supposed to win by just 1 point. He won by 6 times that margin, and this November he's going to win by around a 10-point margin. Texas is going to be likely Republican without a doubt. We also have Florida, which used to be a very competitive state. In fact, Obama won it by narrow margins in both 2008 and 2012. 12 years ago, the Sunshine State was the closest state in the entire country. However, Trump flipped Florida in 2016, which was a pretty big surprise. And an even bigger surprise was that he held onto the state and won it by an even larger margin in 2020. Joe Biden was supposed to win Florida, according to the polling, but Florida's taken a significant shift to the right over the past few years. It re-elected its Republican governor, Ron DeSantis, by a 20-point margin just 2 years ago. On the presidential level, though, Florida's going to be slightly more competitive. Trump can win by around 7 to 10 points, so it's going to be likely red, but it's not going to be solid on the presidential level just yet. And so with these safe and likely states filled in for both candidates, Trump leads with 219 electoral votes to Harris's 191. And so the remaining states that make up 128 electoral votes, this is where the election is really going to be decided. And it's very different from the lean and tilt states we saw in 2020. 4 years ago, we had states like Iowa, Ohio, Texas, and Florida that were among the most competitive. States like Virginia, New Mexico, and New Hampshire were supposed to easily go to Joe Biden. That is no longer the case. Democrats are fighting for their lives in states like Virginia and New Mexico. The latest poll from Virginia has Harris up by just 3 points. She's up by 6 points in New Mexico, but compared to Biden's 11-point margin, that really isn't where she needs to be. And so we're now going to get into the lean states for Kamala Harris. These are states she's going to win by margins between 2 to 7 points. So they're going to be very competitive. We could see upsets here. Trump could win any of these lean states. However, as of right now, Harris still does maintain a slight edge in them. And so we're going to begin down in New Mexico. This is the only state with a Hispanic majority, and as Hispanic voters continue to shift away from the Democratic Party, they're going to have a tougher and tougher time winning the state. Its 5 electoral votes are not too influential. However, Harris does need to win it if she wants to have any chance at getting to 270. But right now, she leads by around 5 points in the polling. She is still the favorite in a state that Joe Biden carried by a double-digit margin 4 years ago. We also have the state of Maine as a whole. Maine went to Biden by 9 points in 2020, and for Harris, obviously, she's going to do a little bit worse, considering Biden's been outperforming her virtually all across the country. And so the state of Maine, its 2 electoral votes from the at-large vote will go to the vice president, and so will Minnesota. This is Tim Walz's home state. Walz is the incumbent governor of Minnesota, and of course, he was chosen to be Harris's running mate. He is going to give Harris a slight boost here, but considering Joe Biden only won the state by 7 points, Harris isn't going to do much better. Minnesota can be competitive. If Harris didn't choose Walz, she would really be in trouble here. In fact, Hillary Clinton almost lost Minnesota in 2016, and the state has only shifted to the right on a fundamental level over the last 8 years. And so Minnesota will be close, but Harris is still the slight favorite. As for Trump, he's on track to win a pretty impressive list of lean states now with Kennedy out of the race. Many of these states, Kennedy's polling at 5 to 10 points, and he is going to give that support to the former president. Starting off with North Carolina, a state Trump won in both 2016 and 2020. In fact, only one Democrat has won the state since 1976, and that was, of course, Obama in 2008. In 2024, Kamala Harris is nothing like Obama, and so she's not going to win the Tar Heel state. Trump is going to win it for a 3rd time, and it's going to fall in the lean GOP column once again. We also have Georgia, a state that Joe Biden won in 2020. The margin was basically as narrow as it possibly could have been, And so it's really not going to take too much for Trump to win the state back this November. Georgia will also be lean Republican, with Harris not polling too well. She's behind in the polling average. Joe Biden was well ahead at this point in time 4 years ago. So Georgia will also be lean Republican. And to finish off the Sun Belt, we have Nevada and Arizona. Nevada, a state Trump has never won before. In fact, in 2016 and 2020, he lost the Silver State by 2.4%. This November, he is on track to winning it, and with Kennedy out, he's going to receive an extra boost. That's why it's going to be lean Republican, just like Arizona, a state that Joe Biden carried in 2020. It was a pretty momentous win for Democrats, but again, just like in Georgia, the margin was just so narrow. It's not going to take too much for Trump to be able to take the state back, especially considering that Joe Biden was performing much better 4 years ago than Harris is right now. And so finishing off the Sun Belt with Arizona, it's going to be another flip for Trump in another lean Republican state. We're now left with just a few states up in the Midwest and the Northeast, but we do have 2 more lean states for Trump to fill in. First off, Wisconsin, 10 electoral votes, a state that Kamala Harris cannot lose. Trump did better in 2016 in Wisconsin than Biden did in 2020 when he won the state back by a very narrow margin. Wisconsin has been consistently among the most competitive states in the entire country. However, with Kennedy out, Trump is going to receive a boost here as well, and considering that it is the most conservative out of the 3 upper Rust Belt states, it's going to be the first one to go. Trump is going to flip Wisconsin, just like Pennsylvania. The Keystone State is even more important to Kamala Harris because this really is a state. If Kamala Harris loses Pennsylvania, the election is essentially over. We know who's going to win. Pennsylvania's 19 electoral votes are just that important for the vice president. Trump already leads in the polling in Pennsylvania, and the boost he's going to get from Kennedy is really going to put him over the edge. And so we now have all of the solid, likely, and lean states filled in, with just 3 tilt states remaining. 3 states that will be decided by less than 2 points, the 3 most competitive states on the map. Michigan, Vermont, and Virginia. One of them does stand out a little bit, and that is Virginia, a state that went to Joe Biden pretty easily in 2020 by a 10.1% margin. In 2016, Clinton won the state by 5 points. Why is it so competitive today? Well, it's just the fact that Virginia has been shifting to the right over the past few years. Yes, the state went pretty far leftward from the 2010s into early 2020, but Glenn Youngkin, a Republican, was able to win the governorship in 2021, and polling has shown a very competitive race in Virginia between Harris and Trump. Before Biden dropped out, Trump was the favorite to win in Virginia based on polling data alone. Today, the most recent poll has Harris leading by 3%, and many previous polls actually had Trump being the favorite. And so that is why Virginia is going to be so competitive, but right now I would still give Harris a very slight advantage. That's why it's going to be tilt blue. As for Trump, he's on track to winning up in New Hampshire, a state he almost won in 2016. The Granite State has not voted red in any election since 2000, but it could this November. Trump came within half a percentage point of securing victory here against Hillary Clinton just 8 years ago. It was very close. It was actually the second closest state of the entire election, even though nobody thought it was going to be that close. Harris is polling okay in the state, but it definitely will get competitive now that Kennedy is out. And the final state on the map we have is Michigan, 15 electoral votes from the Wolverine state. Trump is the very narrow favor right now. He was able to win it back in 2016, and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania both go to the right. It's unlikely that Michigan is going to remain in the Harris column. We also have the 2nd District of Nebraska, which is going to be very, very competitive, and right now Trump is ever so slightly the favorite to win the district back, one that he won in 2016 but lost in 2020. And so with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. out of the race, Trump is going to receive a pretty big boost electorally. He is now on track to winning 317 electoral votes, while Harris trails with just 221, the worst Democratic performance since Michael Dukakis in 1988. Trump flips the entire Sun Belt, all of the Midwest, and even New Hampshire. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November, and join my Discord server, link in the description below.